Hello, welcome back to IT Landy Nugget courses. We will continue with our task for the prerequisite for installing AKS, and we will host, the Node.js. So back to task number 11. We installed the AKS in the previous task 10. If you are interested, you can watch the previous video. This time we need to put the Azure CLI, the kubectl CLI, yeah. So, uh, and, basically, for Mac users, use the Homebrew, and for Windows user, you can use the WSL. So, bro update and then bro install Azure CLI. This is the on your machine, and on for Windows, you need to do the following. Yeah, echo. If you remember, we utilize the Arch 64 AMD package, and then we have to specify with the main sudo and Azure CLI. Then we do sudo apt kev adf, specify the package and the key itself, yeah. And then again sudo install the transport and the sudo get and update the installation using Azure CLI. So that will basically use the Azure CLI and the validation key from a trusted root. Now, to install CLI Kubernetes in addition to Azure CLI, regardless what operating system you are using. So, for example, we are using the WSL. Do AZ login, then do sudo AZ ACS Kubernetes, install the CLI location, the default directory, yeah, which is the Linux one, yeah. User local bin and kubectl. Okay, so we've done the prereq. Next, we will move on to something different. Okay, so before we move on to the environment setup, let's just finalize the last part around the prerequisite, what we have done so far, and then we can move on to the setting up the environment. So a quick recap, what we did, we started with spinning a VM, Windows VM, then we enabled the Linux WSL version 2 on it, which means basically running a Linux on a Windows. And why do we need this one? We need it to basically manage the cluster. Yeah. So this is like a management machine. Then we went down the route of installing basically the agent as well. After that, and that agent we will be using this one for deployment. Yeah, to deploy to AKS, we use the agent. So we created an SSH key, and then we connected the VM, Linux VM, which we created again through the portal. We installed the agent on it. We connected the agent using the SSH key and the command line. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, this agent can be a similar approach, not only for this lab, but like in reality, if you want to use your own agent rather than using a shared agent provided by the central team, you can have your own agent dedicated to you, which means no more delay when you do CI/CD deployment. Then after that, what we did, we said, okay, let's recreate an AKS. Before creating an AKS, there's a prerequisite to have service principal name, SPN, for authentication. So we created that SPN, which we will be using to deploy the AKS in addition to the SSH key. And then we moved on to building up the cluster. Similar to all the activities, we went to this, before that, we did the ACR, the Azure Docker Registry. Now we spun the ACR and without a repo basically. So the ACR, this is the place where we'll be storing our images, yeah? So we build the image, we push it to ACR, and then when we run a deployment, we pull it from there and we deploy it to the AKS. And then the last part, what we did before this session, we did an AKS build. We created a cluster, 2 nodes based on Linux, like Ubuntu, and we had to use the SPN and SSH key for authentication. And then we deployed it. So we have an AKS, we have a couple of VMs, and we have an agent connected to for deployment. And then in order to manage the cluster, we said, okay, let's install the CLI tool. So we installed only two tools. We installed the Kubernetes CLI using the AZ commandlet on the screen, which is task 12. And that will be by sudo AKS Kubernetes install the CLI, location, and the kubectl itself on the VM, and the cluster, sorry, as well. You can do the same thing. And then we install the Azure CLI itself as well. See on the Mac, it's straightforward brew, update, install. But on the WSL, it's a lightweight WSL if you are familiar with it. We had to basically grab it from the same location as the previous tools, package.microsoft.com, repo, CLI, making sure we trust it first, we list the versions, we select the right key associated with it, which is the 93, and then we install it, and then we update it. The next, that was all pre-req. Whatever we have done so far is all pre-req. We created build the environment. The next session, we will start setting up the environment, doing the configuration, and after that, we will start deploying, and then after deployment, we will start browsing, scaling up, scaling down. Please review the exercises we listed on the session 1. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.